Please don't make me say it loudly. Evan is still in the garage. He's hanging from the hoist, and I think he killed them.
That woman was Lorna Merritt, calling 911 at 6:12 on the morning of October 10, 1999. For nearly 27 years, police in Marwick, Ohio, accepted what she told them. Her husband, Evan, had attacked the family and then killed himself in their garage.
But someone reopened it.
A cold case project did. Then, in May of 2026, investigators received an anonymous letter insisting Evan was guilty and telling them to check the garage door. The laboratory swabbed the envelope flap. The saliva belonged to Lorna Merritt.
The survivor sent it.
That is what the DNA said. The letter was meant to reinforce the old murder-suicide finding. Instead, it forced detectives to ask whether the woman who survived the Alder Run murders had created the story everyone else believed.
And she chose an envelope she had to seal with her mouth. That's not sophisticated, it's intimate, almost automatic.
It is also the kind of mistake people make when they are focused on the content of a lie instead of the delivery system. She was thinking about what detectives would read, not what the paper could retain.
Assuming she wrote it.
Fair. DNA on an envelope proves contact with the seal. It does not by itself prove authorship or murder. We are going to keep that distinction clean.
Good, because the title gets us to the envelope, but the case still has to get us to the killer.
This is The Cold File. I'm Marcus Reed. I spent 22 years with the Los Angeles Police Department working homicide and cold cases, and this one begins with a warning I used to give young detectives. A coherent scene can still be a false scene.
And I'm Dr. Christy Hart. Call me Christy.
Christy and I disagree about the original evidence here. Not about whether the investigation failed. It did. We disagree about how suspicious Lorna should have looked before the modern testing.
I think she should have looked very suspicious.
I think that is easier to say with 27 years of findings in your hand.
Marcus, her first sentence was, Evan is still in the garage.
And we are going to hear more of that call, but first we need to see what the deputies saw, in the order they saw it. If you start with the answer, every old mistake looks obvious. Marwick sat in northwestern Ohio, where subdivisions built for factory families ran straight into farm fields. In 1999, the brake components plant still set the rhythm of the town. Shift changes filled the diners, and the freight yard could be heard from almost every street east of downtown.
Alder Run was newer than the factory neighborhoods, right?
Newer, but not wealthy. Small split-level houses, attached garages, narrow backyards. It was the kind of cul-de-sac where people borrowed socket sets and left garage doors open while they cut grass.
Which mattered for Evan.
It did. Evan Merritt was 39 and worked as a municipal fleet mechanic. Police cruisers, snowplows, garbage trucks, anything the city owned that had an engine eventually passed through his bay. Neighbors said he repaired their cars at cost if they bought the parts.
That's a specific kind of generosity. Not flashy. He gave people labor.
Labor and weekends. The week before he died, he was building a workbench for Nolan's 9th birthday. Nolan was 8, but Evan planned early because he wanted the boy to have a real bench, not a toy one.
What was Nolan making?
Birdhouses at first. Evan had bought him a small handsaw, a vise, and safety goggles that were too big. His daughter Maeve, 11, had already claimed one corner of the bench for painting model horses.
So it was becoming theirs before it was finished.
Exactly. Evan worked a Saturday shift on October 9th. At 4:45 that afternoon, he washed up, changed his shirt, and spoke to another mechanic named Daryl Keene.
This is his last verified conversation?
The last one with a reliable time and an independent witness. Daryl later told police Evan seemed angry but focused, not raging, not despondent. Evan said he was going home to confront what he called a family banking problem.
That phrase can carry a lot. Missed payment, hidden credit card, money gone.
The original detectives reduced it to debt. The Merritts had a home equity balance, 2 late utility notices, and roughly $6,000 spread across credit cards.
Painful, but not an annihilation-level financial collapse.
There is no clean debt threshold for family murder. $6,000 can feel terminal to someone whose identity is built on providing, add shame, anger, a marital argument, and access to weapons.
You're already leaning toward Evan.
On the evidence available that first morning, yes. The dead husband had announced a financial confrontation. Neighbors heard an argument, 3 family members were dead inside, and he was hanging in the garage. He was the obvious primary offender.
Obvious is doing dangerous work there.
Obvious is where an investigation starts. It should never be where it stops.
Walk me through the household, because this was not just Evan and Lorna.
Evan lived there with Lorna, who was 37, Their children, Maeve and Nolan, Evan's younger sister Dana Merritt, who was 36, and Lorna and Evan's youngest daughter Ivy, who was 2.
Why was Dana living with them?
Her marriage had broken down that summer. She took the downstairs room while she looked for an apartment. Dana worked mornings at a pharmacy warehouse and helped with Ivy's daycare pickup.
Close enough to see the marriage from inside.
Very close. She also knew Evan had requested copies of the children's custodial account statements. According to one friend, Dana planned to sit with him Sunday and go through the numbers.
That makes the banking problem more concrete.
It does, but the original file did not treat Dana as part of the financial dispute. She was categorized as collateral, someone who happened to be in the house when Evan turned violent.
And Lorna's role in the family finances?
She paid most household bills and handled the children's accounts. Evan deposited money. Lorna moved it.
That distinction should have triggered document subpoenas immediately.
It should have. What police got instead was a thin stack of checking statements provided by Lorna. The packet Evan had ordered never entered the evidence inventory.
We need to pause on the people the original story turned into scenery. Maeve was 11. What did she care about besides those model horses?
She played clarinet, disliked organized sports, and kept a notebook of car colors she wanted Evan to paint someday. Mostly impossible colors. Purple with gold flakes. Bright green with silver stripes.
Perfect 11-year-old taste.
Nolan followed Evan everywhere. Dana had been living there for about 8 weeks, and coworkers described her as practical, funny, and impatient with excuses. Ivy was 2. She was found alive in the rear nursery that morning.
Alive and physically unharmed?
Yes. Awake by the time deputies reached her, crying in her crib, no blood on her clothes, no visible injury.
That survival cuts both ways. If Evan was killing the household, why stop before Ivy? But if Lorna staged it, why leave one child alive in a house full of evidence?
Either offender could have had a reason: interruption, selective attachment, inability to continue, or a belief that a toddler could not contradict the story. At this point, survival alone does not identify anybody.
It does tell us the event had boundaries. Someone made choices room by room.
A neighbor across the street saw Evan's pickup in the driveway before 6 that evening. At around 7:20, another neighbor heard voices from the Merritt house, a man and a woman, both loud enough to carry through an open kitchen window.
Could the neighbor identify the words?
No. She heard tone, not content. The man sounded angry. The woman shouted something back. The window closed, and that was the end of it.
That helps your side.
It does. Evan came home angry about money, and an argument followed. Around midnight, next-door neighbor Raphael Baines reported a heavy impact and a woman crying.
Reported when?
Not until the second interview. In the first interview, Raphael said he slept through the night. His wife initially backed him up.
There's our first alternate suspect.
A weak one at that stage, but yes. Raphael had a prior burglary arrest from his early 20s. No conviction. Detectives wondered whether he had entered the Merritt home, been confronted, and lied about what he heard to hide his presence.
Behaviorally, changing "I heard nothing" to "I heard a woman crying" can mean concealment. It can also mean his wife was sitting beside him during interview 1 and there was something else in their house she did not want discussed.
Which turned out to be relevant. They had been arguing themselves. Raphael said he lied because he did not want police asking why he had spent part of the night on the couch near the window.
Messy witness. Not necessarily violent witness.
Correct. But in the first week, he stayed on the board. At 6:12 Sunday morning, Lorna called 911 from the garage wall phone. She spoke quietly, and there was an irregular metallic click behind her from the garage door track.
Here's the longer section.
Listen to how she gives information. Not whether she cries enough. There is no correct amount of panic. Listen to sequence and wording.
My husband heard us. Dana's inside and the kids. Please send somebody. Evan is still in the garage. I can see his shoes. I don't know if he can get down.
I can see his shoes.
The call continued for just under 4 minutes. Lorna said Evan had cut her shoulder in the kitchen, struck Dana, and dragged Lorna toward the garage. She claimed she lost consciousness near the interior door and woke before dawn.
Yet she could see enough to know he was hanging.
She said she woke, crawled into the garage, saw his lower body, and reached the wall phone without approaching him.
Then why whisper?
She told the operator she did not know whether Evan was dead. Fear does not update like a police report. A person can see an apparently motionless body and still believe the attacker may move.
Absolutely. But she does something interesting. She assigns roles before she requests care. Evan heard us. Dana is inside, the kids, Evan is in the garage. It is a complete cast list.
Or it is a mother trying to tell dispatch where everybody is.
Marcus, she never asks whether an ambulance can save Evan.
She did ask for ambulances generally.
Generally, not for him.
2 patrol officers arrived at 6:19, followed by fire and medical personnel. Lorna raised the overhead garage door from inside. Officers found her sitting on the concrete in a nightshirt with a towel pressed to her left shoulder.
Was she covered in blood?
There was blood on the towel, the shoulder of the nightshirt, and one hand. Not the saturation you would expect from a deep arterial wound. At the time, that was attributed to the cut being survivable.
And Evan?
Suspended from the ceiling hoist by an orange industrial extension cord. His boots were roughly 2 feet above the floor. A low rolling mechanic's stool was on its side several feet away.
The visual story is immediate. He stood on the stool, fixed the cord, kicked it away.
That is what the first officers saw. No forced entry, no unknown vehicle, no open window. Evan's fingerprints were throughout the garage because it was his workspace. The cord belonged to him. The hoist belonged to him.
A scene built from familiar objects.
Which is common in domestic homicide. Most offenders use what is already there. The side service door was still secured by its interior chain. Deputies used the raised overhead door and left that side entrance untouched. That detail did not appear in the press releases.
From the garage, officers went into the house.
Through the interior fire door, Dana was found in the downstairs laundry area with severe head trauma and multiple sharp force wounds. She was dressed for bed but still wearing socks, which suggested she had come downstairs after hearing something.
Or someone summoned her.
Possible. Maeve was in her bedroom. Nolan was in his. Both had been suffocated, likely with bedding. There was no evidence of sexual assault, and no sign that drawers had been searched.
Different methods. Yes.
The original theory was escalation and access. Evan attacked Dana during the argument, subdued the children in their rooms, cut Lorna when she fought back, and then went to the garage.
That's a lot of controlled movement for a man described as suddenly snapping.
Snapped is usually lazy language. Family killers can act with sustained purpose. Rage and planning are not opposites.
I agree with that. What bothers me is the sequence the scene asks us to accept. Dana gets the loud, bloody attack. The children are killed quietly. Lorna receives a shallow, survivable cut. Evan then constructs a hanging in the one room that identifies him as himself, the mechanic in his garage.
That sequence could reflect resistance. Dana fought. The children were asleep. Lorna escaped a deeper injury because Evan believed she was unconscious.
Or because her wound had a job to do.
Lorna said Evan struck Dana first. She said Maeve ran upstairs. Nolan followed, and Lorna grabbed a kitchen knife from Evan's hand. During that struggle, the blade crossed her shoulder. Evan then forced her through the interior door into the garage.
Did her blood trail support being dragged?
There were drops from the kitchen toward the garage, but no continuous transfer pattern. Investigators wrote that the cotton nightshirt may have absorbed most of the blood.
Did they test the direction of those drops?
Basic photographs and swabs. No formal bloodstain pattern reconstruction. That was not unusual for a scene officers believed they understood.
There it is.
Bad practice does not require bad faith. Once the lead detective saw a domestic murder-suicide, resources narrowed around confirming that model. They collected the obvious weapon, photographed the rooms, interviewed neighbors, and stopped asking what evidence would exist if Lorna's version were false.
That is the surviving witness advantage. The living person supplies verbs. Evan struck. Evan dragged. Evan cut. The dead can only supply injuries, and those injuries need someone competent enough to read them.
Which brings us to Dr. Veda Rusk, the county coroner. Rusk examined Evan on October 10th and issued her preliminary ruling the next day: suicide following homicide. She documented ligature compression around the neck, congestion in the face, and a wound at the rear of the scalp.
A scalp wound?
Roughly 2 inches, with swelling beneath it. Rusk concluded Evan struck the back of his head against the hoist or concrete wall while positioning the cord.
Was the skull imaged?
No radiographs. She opened the scalp, but did not fully reflect the tissue over the depressed area. Her report called it non-fatal blunt impact.
That is painfully thin.
It is. But remember, a hanging can create facial congestion, neck findings, and small hemorrhages. Those findings are real, even if their interpretation later changes.
And toxicology?
A limited screen for alcohol, common narcotics, and stimulants. Negative, a blood tube was preserved, but no targeted test for prescription sedatives was ordered.
So the initial pathology didn't prove Evan could carry out the attacks. It just failed to detect a reason he couldn't.
That is fair. Still, at this stage, I would not have cleared him. He had the confrontation, the opportunity, a scene consistent on first inspection with suicide, and no verified outsider in the house.
I wouldn't clear him either, but I would put Lorna in a separate interview room before she had time to rehearse with relatives.
Police interviewed her at the hospital with her sister and a victim advocate present.
Of course they did.
The hospital described Lorna's shoulder wound as a straight incision, a little over 3 inches long. It passed through skin and superficial tissue but stopped before the muscle.
Clean edges?
Clean. Minimal surrounding bruising. She received local anesthetic, irrigation, and sutures. She was discharged that afternoon.
That does not resemble a knife skidding across a moving shoulder during a fight.
It can. A sharp blade moving quickly can leave a straight superficial wound.
With no grip bruises, no defensive cuts on her hands, and no torn fabric around the incision,
The nightshirt had a cut corresponding to the injury.
a corresponding cut proves the blade went through the shirt. It doesn't prove Evan held it. The geometry is controlled. One line, limited depth, accessible area, no muscle involvement. That's where I stopped treating her only as fortunate.
And I say you need more before calling it self-inflicted. Survivors of real attacks often have injuries that look cleaner than the violence felt.
I'm not calling it self-inflicted yet. I'm saying the wound supports her story too perfectly while demanding very little physical risk.
That is a legitimate suspicion.
Thank you. I'm framing that.
Don't. I may take it back. By Sunday afternoon, officers had a dead family, an injured survivor, and a theory that fit the broad outline. Evan had discovered financial trouble, argued with Lorna, killed Dana and the children, failed to kill Lorna, and then hanged himself.
What did Lorna say the argument was about?
Credit card spending. She said Evan accused her of hiding bills and threatened to leave. She admitted they argued, but denied any larger missing sum.
Did she mention the custodial accounts?
Not in the first hospital interview. When detectives asked 2 days later, she said Evan had become confused after seeing an outdated balance and believed money was missing when it had merely been transferred between accounts.
That answer is remarkably organized for someone supposedly learning that her husband murdered 3 people over finances.
Or she had spent 2 days trying to understand what triggered him.
Marcus.
I hear you. But if I am reconstructing the original case honestly, Evan remained the likeliest offender at that point. Lorna's wound was suspicious, but not impossible. Her call was controlled but not emotionless. The argument was independently heard.
And my problem is that every fact against Evan arrived through a scene Lorna controlled or a statement Lorna supplied. The independent evidence gets us only to an argument. It does not get us to murder.
The bodies and hanging were independent evidence.
The deaths were. The story connecting them was not.
The public version hardened fast. This local report aired the evening after the coroner's ruling.
Morrowick police say 39-year-old Evan Merritt killed 3 members of his family before taking his own life inside the garage. His wife survived with a knife wound, and the couple's 2-year-old daughter was found unharmed.
No, allegedly.
No, Evan was named as the killer before laboratory work was complete and before full banking records had been obtained.
Which meant every person approaching the case afterward already knew who the town thought did it.
That affects witnesses. People remember anger more sharply. Routine disagreements become warnings. Evan's brother Clay told police Evan had been short-tempered about missing inventory at their weekend repair shop. A neighbor remembered Evan slamming a truck door. Darrell Keene reconsidered that final conversation and said maybe Evan had seemed more agitated than he first realized.
Memory starts auditioning for the established story.
Exactly. It does not mean those witnesses lied. It means certainty changes what details feel important.
What about people who loved Evan?
His brother Clay protested publicly. Evan's co-workers pooled money for separate flowers bearing Evan's name because the main memorial notice listed only Dana and the children.
That's brutal. He was buried inside an accusation.
Raphael Baines remained the only outsider with a potentially useful sound timeline. He said the heavy impact occurred near midnight, followed by a woman crying for several minutes.
If accurate, that could be Evan striking, Dana Lorna being attacked, or Lorna finding the scene.
It could also place Raphael awake close to the property. Detectives checked for shoe impressions, tool marks, and missing valuables. Nothing tied him to the house.
His wife's confirmation was compromised because they coordinated the first lie.
True, but years later, the cold case team recovered an old security recording from the freight yard. The camera did not show Alder run, but its microphone picked up a distant impact and a dog barking afterward. Enhancement placed that sound earlier than Raphael remembered.
Human memory, not a mysterious noise.
Right. A freight camera clock drift, and the documented train schedule allowed technicians to correct the timestamp. The impact occurred before 11, not at midnight. Raphael had attached it to the approximate time he moved to the couch.
So his inconsistency was real, but the explanation was ordinary. Marital embarrassment and bad time estimation.
Correct. Suspicious behavior is not always evidence of the charged crime.
That probably clears Raphael eventually, but not yet. He still heard a woman crying. The question is what she was crying about and whether it was spontaneous distress or part of the scene management.
1 week after the deaths, investigators returned to the garage photographs and focused on a message written across the freezer in orange grease pencil. Don't open the side door.
Who found it?
It was visible in the original photographs, but an officer documented it formally on October 17th. The grease pencil came from a tray above Evan's workbench.
And they decided Evan wrote it.
They believed he did. The theory was that he chained the service door, wrote the warning to prevent anyone from entering that way, and then prepared the hanging. It looked like a final instruction from a controlling offender.
An instruction to whom? If the side door was chained from inside, a person outside couldn't read the freezer until after entering.
Lorna could have seen it from the interior doorway. Police thought Evan may have written it during the period he was moving between the house and garage, possibly telling her not to flee through that exit.
But she said she was unconscious.
She said she did not remember everything between the kitchen struggle and waking near the garage.
Convenient gap.
Trauma can produce fragmented recall.
It can. It can also provide room to adjust a story after physical evidence comes back.
The note did help my original reading. It was Evan's grease pencil in Evan's garage beside Evan's body. Combined with the financial confrontation, it suggested preparation.
It pushes me the other way. It explains the scene too loudly. Whoever wrote it wanted investigators thinking about that door.
Or Evan wanted the door kept closed.
Then why was the freezer handle wiped?
In 1999, detectives thought the smear came from paramedics or an officer brushing the surface.
Thought or tested?
Thought. When the Cold Case Project digitized the negative in 2025, the image resolved the order of events. Blood had dried inside the recessed handle. The outer surface was wiped afterward. Then the orange grease pencil message was written across those fresh wipe streaks.
There it is.
It did not identify the writer, but it meant the warning was not an untouched message Evan left during the first violence. Someone handled the freezer after blood was deposited, cleaned part of it, and wrote over the clean surface.
Which turns the note from a dying man's instruction into an act of editing.
Potentially. There was another problem. No one had preserved a known sample of Evan's grease pencil printing for comparison.
Did they compare Lorna's?
Not in 1999. She was the injured widow. Her recipe cards, household labels, and employment forms were never collected.
And the missing bank packet?
Also never found. Evan had requested it the day before he died. The bank confirmed preparation of the copies, but the envelope was absent from the house, the municipal garage, and his pickup.
So someone cleaned the freezer, wrote a warning that directed attention toward Evan's supposed final acts, and removed the papers behind his confrontation.
Or Evan removed the packet himself, confronted Lorna, and wrote the warning before committing the murders. That remained possible on the original record.
Possible. But now I want to know who benefited from the missing numbers, and why the only injury that left a witness alive was cut with such careful precision.
The red herring was not one false clue. It was the entire family annihilation narrative. Evan's anger, the modest debt, the hanging, Lorna's wound, and the grease pencil warning all pointed in one direction, if detectives accepted the scene at face value.
And once they did, conflicting evidence became background noise.
Exactly. The scalp injury became an accidental bump. The missing bank packet became irrelevant paperwork. The freezer wipe became contamination. Lorna's precise wound became luck. Each problem received its own harmless explanation instead of being tested as part of coordinated staging.
That's how a bad theory survives. Not because every piece supports it, but because every opposing piece gets isolated.
The cost was enormous. Evan was publicly assigned 3 murders. Dana was treated as accidental collateral to a marital dispute. Maeve and Nolan became evidence of their father's supposed breakdown, and the only living adult witness was allowed to define the event without a recorded adversarial interview.
Let's give the original theory its strongest version, though. If Evan did it, why that night?
Exposure. He believed Lorna had hidden debt. He came home intending to confront her, and the argument escalated. In the family annihilator model, the violence restores control by destroying the family that reflects the offender's perceived failure.
Shame converted into ownership. If I can't preserve this family on my terms, no one gets to continue without me.
That behavior exists. which is why Evan remained a serious suspect until the physical evidence excluded him.
That headline did more than report a ruling. It gave the town a finished villain.
And Evan could not answer it. Detectives found no suicide note, no prior threat against the children, no history of domestic assault, and no evidence he had searched for hanging methods.
But absence of history doesn't clear him.
No. First-time domestic homicide happens. Evan also had mechanical knowledge, physical strength, and intimate access to every victim. He knew the hoist's load capacity and could have rigged the cord without difficulty.
That's a point for you. The garage staging required someone comfortable with the equipment.
Or someone who had watched him use it. Lorna had lived with that hoist for years.
You're moving.
I am acknowledging alternatives. I still would have kept Evan at the top during the first week, but I would have built a victimology for him, not an offender biography assembled after the ruling.
What did that victimology show?
A man who confronted problems directly, saved receipts, and disliked owing favors. Coworkers said Evan could be stubborn and loud, but none described intimidation at home. Maeve's teacher remembered him attending conferences in work clothes because he came straight from the city garage. Nolan's pediatric file listed Evan as the parent who usually brought him.
Not proof of innocence, but it complicates the image of a secretly detached father erasing everybody.
It does. The original file largely omitted those details because they did not help explain the scene police believed they had. Evan's brother, Clay Merritt, refused to attend the joint memorial if Evan's name was excluded. The family compromised by placing a separate photograph of him in a side room.
So Clay was defending Evan from the beginning.
Publicly, yes. Privately, their relationship was more difficult. Clay was 43 and co-owned a small repair shop where Evan worked Saturdays when the municipal garage did not need him. The brothers had recently argued over missing alternators, brake calipers, and several cases of motor oil.
Missing inventory gives Clay a financial motive.
Potentially. Evan believed Clay was selling parts for cash and failing to enter the sales. Clay said their temporary bookkeeper had mislabeled stock. One employee heard Evan threaten to audit the storage cage himself.
That puts another confrontation in Evan's final week.
It did, and detectives interviewed Clay twice. His grief was mixed with anger at the police. Here is part of an archived television interview recorded outside the funeral home.
Evan didn't kill those kids. He was building Nolan a bench. You can call me his brother and say I'm blind, but don't call your guess a fact.
That hurts.
It also made detectives wonder whether Clay's defense was guilt management. If he had killed Evan over the shop dispute, blaming the dead man for the household murders would conceal the original motive.
But then Clay would also have to kill Dana and the children or leave them as witnesses.
Correct. That turns a parts theft dispute into 4 murders and a complicated domestic frame. Possible, but the motive begins to strain unless Clay entered during the family argument and improvised around what he found.
Where did Clay say he was?
At a union banquet in Findlay. He appeared in a group photograph taken shortly after 8:30, paid for 2 drinks at 9:14, and signed a raffle claim at 10:47.
That last time matters because the freight yard impact was before 11.
Yes. Findlay was too far away for Clay to leave the banquet after the raffle, reach Alder Run for the likely attack, and return without anyone noticing. Several attendees remembered him staying through cleanup. His restaurant receipt closed after midnight.
Could someone have used his card and claimed the raffle for him?
Detectives tested that. The banquet photograph showed the winning ticket in his hand, and 3 people independently described him arguing over whether the prize would fit in his truck. The alibi was not one timestamp, it was a chain.
That's what a real alibi looks like. Different sources that do not depend on each other.
Right. Photograph, receipt, witnesses, and travel time. Clay was volatile and the inventory dispute was real, but it did not place him inside the Merritt house.
Did the missing shop inventory connect to the brake drum on Evan's bench?
No. That drum came from a retired municipal truck and had been released to Evan as scrap for a training project. The city had paperwork documenting it.
So Clay's motive had heat but no reach.
That is a good way to put it. By the end of the original investigation, police correctly cleared him. Raphael Baines required more work because his alibi came from his wife, and both had lied during the first interview.
Did police ever establish whether Raphael left his house?
They found no physical evidence that he did, no footwear impressions matched his boots, no fibers, fingerprints, or blood connected him to the Merritt property. Nothing was stolen, and he had no known conflict with Evan, Dana, or Lorna.
His old burglary arrest kept him interesting longer than the facts did.
Yes. He had been arrested at 22 after riding in a car containing stolen tools. The charge was dismissed when another man admitted taking them. But once a detective writes, prior burglary beside changed statement, the suspicion becomes sticky.
What did his wife finally say about that night?
They argued over money around 9. Raphael slept on the living room couch, which placed him near the front window. She stayed in the bedroom. She heard the freight train after 10 and heard Raphael get up once to use the bathroom, but she could not account for every minute.
Not a perfect alibi.
No, the corrected freight recording helped. The impact and dog response occurred while a long freight consist was blocking the nearest road crossing. If Raphael drove, the direct route was unavailable. If he walked, he had to cross exposed yards in light rain.
Still possible.
Possible is not probable. No motive, no trace, no entry evidence, and no reason to construct a hanging that blamed Evan while leaving Lorna alive.
Unless Lorna was involved with him.
Investigators checked. No calls, no financial connection, no witness placing them together beyond ordinary neighbor contact.
Then his lie explained embarrassment, not murder.
The cold case team also enhanced the audio enough to distinguish two events. First came a dull metallic impact. Roughly 40 seconds later, a dog began barking. The crying Raphael remembered did not appear clearly on the recording because the microphone faced the freight yard, away from Alder Run.
Could the impact have been railway equipment?
Technicians compared it with coupling noises across the same tape, different acoustic profile. The sound was shorter, less resonant, and came from the residential side of the microphone. They could not prove it was the brake drum striking Evan, but it fit a heavy object hitting a hard surface.
Concrete garage floor?
Or a wall, appliance, vehicle panel, several ordinary possibilities. The recording narrowed timing. It did not identify the source.
And Raphael's crying woman?
If he heard her accurately, the obvious candidate was Lorna. She may have been genuinely distressed. She may have been reacting to violence. She may also have been testing whether neighbors could hear her.
That last possibility matters behaviorally. Staging is not always silent. An offender may produce visible or audible distress before discovery because witnesses later confirm, yes, she was crying.
But we cannot promote that from possibility to fact. Raphael did not see her. He heard what he believed was a woman crying.
Agreed. Keep it in pencil.
Then detectives learned Lorna had been having an affair.
There's the suspect who can make a staged family murder work with two sets of hands.
Miles Tollin was 35 and had worked with Lorna at a commercial printer before she left the company in the spring of 1999. He was married, so was she. Their relationship lasted about 14 months.
How did police miss him initially?
Lorna denied any affair, and Miles denied social contact beyond work. The original detectives accepted both answers after checking recent home telephone records, which showed no calls between them.
Too narrow?
Much too narrow. In 2025, investigators obtained archived billing records for a calling card registered to a post office box under Lorna's maiden name. That card had been used to call Miles's workplace extension and a payphone near his apartment.
So they had concealed communication infrastructure.
Yes. The affair gave Lorna a possible escape plan and gave Miles a possible motive to remove Evan. It also explained why both lied when a truthful answer would have been embarrassing but not criminal.
And if Miles helped, the physical logistics become easier. One person controls the house while the other moves Evan into the garage.
That was the cold case team's first serious alternative offender theory.
Where was Miles during the likely attack window?
Working an overnight press run in Toledo. He clocked in shortly after 7 in the evening and remained assigned to a high-volume catalog job until 5:38 Sunday morning.
Payroll can be manipulated.
Which is why detectives did not stop there. The press required operator confirmations at repeated stages. Miles's employee code appeared throughout the run. 3 coworkers saw him cleaning rollers, correcting a color balance, and eating from the vending machines after midnight.
Could he have shared the code?
In theory. But one coworker remembered Miles cutting his finger on a plate edge shortly before 11 and getting a bandage from the shift supervisor. The supervisor logged the minor injury. Another worker drove him home after the shift because Miles's car would not start.
That's tight.
Very. To participate at Alder Run, Miles would have needed to leave a continuously staffed press line, travel from Toledo to Morrowick, commit or assist in 4 murders, return, and be seen again without the production interruption appearing in the machine record.
So the affair was real, the lie was real, and the murder theory was wrong.
As to Miles being physically present, yes. Investigators also found Lorna had reduced contact with him during the month before the deaths.
Why distance herself if he was part of the escape plan?
He had told her he would not leave his wife. The relationship had stopped being an exit and become another source of exposure.
That makes him less useful to her, and potentially more dangerous as someone who knew she was moving money.
Miles admitted the affair only after investigators confronted him with the calling card records. He said Lorna described Evan as controlling and claimed she was saving money to leave.
Did Miles know where the money came from?
He said she told him it was income from bookkeeping work and a small inheritance. No inheritance existed. Miles also said Lorna once asked whether a person could receive life insurance if a spouse died by suicide.
That is a sharp detail.
It is, but it came 26 years later from a man who had already lied. Detectives looked for corroboration. A former coworker remembered a lunchroom discussion about insurance exclusions, but she could not say who asked the original question.
So it's useful context, not courtroom-grade proof.
Correct. Interview evidence ages badly. People blend conversations, borrow later information, and unconsciously improve their own importance.
Still, Miles changes the motive picture. Lorna was not merely embarrassed by credit cards. She had a hidden relationship, concealed communications, and a private source of money she misrepresented.
Yes, his alibi cleared him as an accomplice, but his account increased scrutiny on Lorna.
Which is almost the reverse of what she would have wanted. The affair initially gives her another man to blame. Then the records leave her standing alone.
The Cold Case Project next sent Lorna's hospital photographs and nightshirt to a forensic pathologist who specialized in patterned injuries.
Finally.
The reviewer could not say with absolute certainty that Lorna cut herself. But the opinion was direct. The wound was more consistent with controlled infliction than with an active knife struggle.
Because of depth and geometry?
Depth, geometry, accessibility, and absence of secondary trauma. The incision remained nearly uniform from one end to the other. A blade drag during resistance usually varies as bodies move. There was no bruising suggesting Evan pinned her shoulder, no gripping marks on her upper arms, and no cuts to her hands.
What about the shirt?
The slit was clean and aligned with the skin injury. The reviewer believed the fabric was held relatively still when cut. That could mean self-infliction or cooperation with another person.
Miles is cleared, so cooperation with whom?
No evidence identified anyone else. That made self-infliction the simpler explanation. But pathology cannot assign intent. It can only describe what the body supports.
Her wound had three purposes, if staged. Establish victim status, explain her blood at the scene, and make the 911 call emotionally credible.
It also carried low medical risk. That supports your position.
Say it slower.
No. In March of 2001, after a state review and insurance processing, Lorna received the family's combined life insurance proceeds. She then moved with Ivy to Lake Sibley.
Did the suicide ruling reduce the payout on Evan's policy?
The policy had been active beyond its suicide exclusion period. Dana and the children were also insured through separate family policies and workplace benefits. Because Lorna was treated as a surviving victim, with no suspected role in the deaths, no Slayer review delayed her claim.
So the official story did not just protect her from investigation, it unlocked the money.
Yes. Money alone does not prove murder, and beneficiaries routinely receive legitimate proceeds after terrible deaths. But if Lorna staged the scene, the murder-suicide narrative served a material purpose. Evan absorbed blame, she remained eligible, and the family's financial records disappeared into an administratively closed case.
What did she do in Lake Sibley?
She bought a smaller house, returned to bookkeeping, and raised Ivy under her maiden name. She gave few interviews and told neighbors her husband had suffered a breakdown.
That's narrative control over decades.
Or privacy after public trauma. Again, conduct after the fact can support opposite interpretations.
True. But if she is the offender, surviving with Ivy also gives her a permanent witness to her victim identity, not a witness to the murders, but a child raised inside Lorna's version.
One object had remained in evidence from the garage: the cast iron brake drum seen on Evan's new workbench.
Why was it collected if police thought he hanged himself?
A crime scene technician noticed a reddish trace inside one recessed groove. The drum weighed just over 30 pounds and was heavy enough to produce blunt force trauma. It was swabbed, printed, wrapped, and stored.
Better police work.
One technician doing the job correctly can preserve a case for people not yet born into the profession. The original laboratory identified the trace as Evan's blood type, but the sample was too small for the testing available then. A partial palm impression on the outer face was attributed to Lorna.
Evan's blood and Lorna's hand on a potential weapon.
In a shared garage, Lorna said she had moved the drum while cleaning. Evan frequently cut his hands at work. The coroner had already explained his scalp wound as contact with the hoist, so detectives treated the drum as unrelated.
Another isolated, harmless explanation.
Yes. The chain of custody, however, was excellent. The parcel seals remained intact, each transfer was initialed, and the drum had not been removed since 1999.
Which meant modern testing could ask a better question.
Modern DNA testing confirmed the blood in the groove belonged to Evan. The pattern was not a casual smear from a cut finger. It consisted of tiny impact droplets protected inside the recess.
Impact from what?
The analyst could not reconstruct the entire event from that limited stain, but droplets inside the groove were consistent with the drum being close to a blood-producing impact. Evan's blood reached an area that ordinary handling would not easily touch.
And Lorna's palm?
The old lift preserved enough ridge detail to maintain the identification. Her palm had contacted the drum's outer face. No reliable dating method could establish whether that happened during the murders or weeks earlier.
So it is not yet the murder weapon in an evidentiary sense.
Correct. It is a heavy object carrying Evan's impact blood and Lorna's print. That is highly significant when combined with his unexplained head injury, but each component still requires interpretation.
You're giving me ground and taking it back sentence by sentence.
That is evidence review.
It is emotional interval training.
The family photograph taken 1 week before the murders proved the drum was already on the workbench. It had not been brought in by an outsider that night.
It also explains why Lorna's print could be innocent.
It does. Household item evidence is difficult because legitimate access comes built in. If I find a stranger's palm on that drum, I have a lead. If I find the homeowner's spouse, I need context.
But context is accumulating. Evan's blood is in a protected groove. His head wound is near the shape and weight class that drum could create. Lorna says Evan dragged her into the garage. Her hand is on the object.
And Evan could have struck himself accidentally while working days earlier.
Hard enough to throw impact droplets into a recessed groove?
Less likely, but not impossible. Mechanics get injured around heavy parts. The decisive issue was whether the head wound occurred before death and whether it disabled him.
Which Dr. Rusk never properly established.
Right. Until the autopsy slides were reviewed, the drum shifted suspicion but did not settle the sequence.
I'm still putting Lorna above Evan.
At this point, I'm moving them closer. The staged injury opinion and drum evidence weaken the original case substantially. But I still need pathology before declaring a dead man incapable. The Morrowick Cold Case project began in April of 2025. It was not launched specifically for the merits. The department was digitizing unresolved deaths, questionable suicides, and evidence inventories created before modern DNA testing.
Who selected this file?
A records technician noticed that 4 deaths shared one case number, but only one was classified as homicide in the indexing system. Dana, Maeve, and Nolan were coded as homicide victims. Evan was coded only as a suicide offender.
Even the database had accepted the conclusion.
Yes. The technician flagged the missing imaging, the preserved blood tube, and the brake drum. A detective named Elise Ward requested the original negatives and discovered the wipe streaks beneath the grease pencil message.
One indexing mismatch reopened a family.
That is often how cold cases move, not through a dramatic confession. Someone notices an inventory entry that does not agree with another entry and refuses to shrug.
It reminds me of the records problem in He Found the Fraud, He Was Dead by Morning. The murder looked personal until the paperwork showed who needed the victim silenced.
Same investigative principle. When a person dies immediately after requesting financial records, find the records before you accept the emotional story offered at the scene. The department did not publicly identify Lorna as a suspect when it announced the review. This brief report aired after the project confirmed that the merit evidence was being retested.
Morrowick police are re-examining the 1999 Alder Run deaths, including physical evidence from the garage where Evan Merritt was found. Officials say the original murder-suicide ruling has not been withdrawn.
That is cautious.
Appropriately cautious. But the report reached Lake Sibley. Investigators later confirmed Lorna watched the segment through an online local news archive.
How could they establish that?
A search warrant obtained after the envelope DNA match recovered browser records from her home computer. The site logged repeated visits to Morrowick coverage, including the cold case announcement and a follow-up story about the garage photographs.
Concrete technology, not mind reading.
Exactly. Browser records show access. They do not tell us what she felt, but if she wrote the later letter, those reports explain why she acted after nearly 27 years of silence.
Renewed scrutiny threatened the settled story.
And the letter attempted to steer that scrutiny toward a physical feature of the garage. Before the letter arrived, Detective Ward located archived bank records on microfiche. They showed the family banking problem was not $6,000 of consumer debt.
How much was missing?
More than $180,000 had been moved from custodial accounts over several years.
That's not hidden spending. That's sustained theft.
The accounts held money intended for Maeve, Nolan, and Ivy, including gifts from grandparents and proceeds from a property sale. Transfers carried signatures purporting to be Evan's. A document examiner concluded several were traced or simulated.
Where did the money go?
Into short-term accounts, controlled by Lorna, then through cashier's checks, cash withdrawals, and a post office box under her maiden name. Some money paid household expenses, some funded hotel stays and purchases associated with Miles. A substantial portion remained unaccounted for.
Evan requested the statements on Saturday.
Correct. The bank prepared the packet that afternoon. Its internal log showed Evan planned to collect it after his shift, and a teller remembered handing him the envelope shortly before 4:30.
So he did bring it home.
The teller identified him and described the municipal garage shirt he was wearing. The packet disappeared before police arrived.
That is the confrontation trigger.
It is a concrete one. Evan did not come home upset about ordinary debt. He came home carrying evidence that someone had drained his children's money using his name.
Now the victim selection starts to make a terrible kind of sense if Lorna is the offender. Dana knew Evan planned to review the accounts. She was going to sit beside him Sunday.
Dana could confirm Lorna controlled the finances and could contradict any claim that Evan misunderstood the balances.
Maeve and Nolan were not financial witnesses in the adult sense, but killing them transformed a fraud murder into a recognizable family annihilation. It also removed the children whose accounts had been stolen.
And Ivy?
At 2, Ivy could not describe transfers, arguments, or scene movement. Leaving her alive allowed Lorna to retain the identity of a mother who still had someone to protect. Selective attachment can coexist with lethal violence against other children when the offender assigns them different psychological roles.
That is a harsh profile, but it answers why the toddler survived. The original Evan theory never explained the boundary beyond interruption or emotional collapse.
Do the bank records move you off him?
They give Lorna a stronger financial motive than Evan. He had discovered the fraud. She faced exposure, possible prison, loss of the marriage, loss of access to the children, and public discovery of the affair.
That's a lot more than shame over $6,000.
Yes. But motive does not lift a brake drum or tie a cord. I still need the body to tell me who could physically complete the sequence.
You're hanging on by pathology.
That is where homicide cases should hang on. On May 8, 2026, the anonymous letter arrived at the police department. It was postmarked from a sorting center serving Lake Sibley and several surrounding communities.
What did the writer want police to believe?
That the cold case team was wasting time. The letter said Evan had been unstable, that Lorna survived only because he believed she was unconscious, and that the garage proved no outsider entered.
Defensive, not helpful.
One passage read, "Check the garage door. Evan locked the family in, and the side door stayed chained. Stop tormenting the people he left alive."
That is not a confession-style tip. It is advocacy disguised as certainty.
The writer included no return address and used plain stationery sold nationally. The postal cancellation narrowed the region, but not the sender. Investigators preserved the envelope before unfolding the letter, photographed the flap, and swabbed both the adhesive and the exterior edges separately.
Good chain.
Very good. The saliva profile from the seal later matched Lorna. Touch DNA on the outer edge was mixed and not useful. Handwriting examiners also found repeated formations consistent with Lorna's old recipe cards, but handwriting was treated as supportive rather than definitive.
And her explanation for the saliva?
We will get to that. At the moment the letter arrived, investigators still had to prove Evan was not simply the guilty man Lorna happened to be defending. While the envelope work proceeded, 2 forensic reviews came back. The first involved Dr. Rusk's preserved tissue slides and autopsy photographs. The second involved Evan's sealed blood sample.
Was the sample still reliable after 27 years?
For the testing performed, yes. The tube had remained sealed and refrigerated. The chain documented every transfer. The laboratory also tested the preservative and compared degradation markers before reporting a result.
Start with the head injury.
A forensic neuropathologist reconstructed the portion Dr. Rusk had not fully examined. The scalp wound covered a depressed skull fracture at the back of Evan's head. Beneath it were hemorrhage and brain injury showing circulation at the time of impact.
So he was alive when struck.
Alive, and the injury was not a minor collision with the hoist. The fracture shape and inward displacement were consistent with a heavy, blunt object. The neuropathologist considered it rapidly incapacitating and potentially fatal without immediate treatment.
The brake drum.
Consistent in weight and edge geometry, but not uniquely identified. Then the reviewer examined the body position evidence. Evan's postmortem lividity had settled across his back, shoulders, and the rear surfaces of his arms. That pattern forms when a body remains lying horizontally after circulation stops. It did not match a man who died suspended upright.
He was moved after death.
Yes. He lay on his back long enough for the lividity to become substantially fixed, then someone raised him into the hoist. The neck compression occurred, but the tissue response was limited and inconsistent with hanging as the primary cause of death.
Marcus?
This is where I'm off, Evan, specifically and completely. I gave the original scene too much weight because its components were mechanically plausible. The revised pathology establishes that Evan could not have killed the family and then constructed that hanging. He was struck, left horizontal, and suspended after death.
That changes every room.
It does. The garage was not the place where the offender died. It was the last place the offender edited Evan.
And the blood test?
Evan's blood contained a high concentration of temazepam, a prescription sedative. The laboratory found both the drug and its metabolite, establishing that he ingested it before death rather than someone adding it to the sample afterward.
How impaired?
Severely. Slowed reactions, poor balance, confusion, and likely periods of unconsciousness. Combined with the skull fracture, he was physically incapable of moving through the house, overpowering 4 people, cleaning the freezer, writing the grease pencil warning, rigging the cord, and lifting himself into the hoist.
Where did the drug come from?
The dose matched tablets prescribed after a dental procedure several months earlier. The prescription was issued to Lorna Merritt.
Then we are no longer reviewing a suicide after homicide. We are looking for the person who sedated Evan, fractured his skull, and raised his dead body into his own hoist. Wait, the side door.
What about it?
Earlier you said the interior chain was never mentioned in the press releases, but the letter says the side door stayed chained.
Correct.
Then the writer did not learn that from television coverage. That person either entered the garage before deputies arrived, received unreleased information from someone who did, or accessed the original investigative file.
And detectives audited access to the file. No former officer, coroner's employee, insurance investigator, or records technician connected to Lake Sibley knew about the chain. Lorna knew about the chain because she was in the garage that morning.
She tried to point police toward proof that no outsider entered, but disclosed knowledge only an insider should possess.
Exactly. The letter was not merely defending Evan. It was reproducing the locked scene argument Lorna had depended on since 1999.
That is why she mentioned the garage door. She knew investigators were looking at the staging, and she wanted them focused on entry instead of movement inside the house.
The irony is that no outsider was required. The chain side door did not protect the murder-suicide theory. It protected the actual offender by making the house appear sealed around Evan. Here is the reconstruction investigators ultimately presented to prosecutors. Lorna knew Evan had requested the custodial account records. She knew those records would expose forged signatures, more than $180,000 in transfers, the secret post office box, and spending connected to Miles Tolland.
Exposure meant more than divorce. It meant losing control of the money, losing the children, and likely facing felony charges.
Evan collected the packet and returned home. The argument heard through the kitchen window was probably real. It was not the prelude to Evan murdering his family. It was Evan confronting the person who had stolen from them.
That flips the neighbor's statement. His anger was treated as evidence of homicidal rage. It may have been the last normal response he ever had.
Prosecutors believe Lorna administered temazepam orally sometime during that evening. The blood chemistry proves Evan swallowed the drug and metabolized it. It cannot establish whether the tablets were hidden in food, dissolved in a drink, or given under some other pretext.
But the source was concrete. Her prescription.
Yes. As Evan became impaired, he would have lost coordination and the ability to defend himself effectively. In or near the garage, Lorna struck the back of his head with a heavy, blunt object. The brake drum is the leading weapon because it carried his impact blood in a protected groove and her palm print on its outer face.
Not uniquely proven, but nothing else in evidence fits as well.
Correct. The strike fractured Evan's skull and dropped him. He remained on his back long enough for lividity to settle across the rear of his body.
A 39-year-old man is difficult for one person to lift. How did Lorna get him into the hoist?
She did not have to deadlift him. Evan's ceiling unit included a hand-operated chain fall used for engines. A chain fall provides mechanical advantage. Investigators tested the same model with weighted rescue equipment. One adult could raise Evan's approximate body weight in stages.
So the hoist was not only symbolic, it solved a physical problem.
Exactly. Lorna could attach the extension cord while Evan was on the floor, connect it to the hoist, and operate the chain until his boots cleared the concrete. The overturned stool then supplied the visual explanation police expected.
And the limited neck response makes sense because circulation had already stopped.
Right, the cord compressed tissue after death. It created the appearance of hanging without producing the full biological pattern of a living suspension.
The garage turned his mechanical skill against him. Police saw equipment Evan knew how to use and assumed he must have used it.
When the more relevant question was, who else understood what that equipment could do?
His spouse did.
She had watched him raise engines and transmissions with that hoist for years. Dana complicated the plan because she knew about the statements and intended to review them with Evan. Investigators believe she entered the confrontation and was attacked downstairs.
Her injuries suggest resistance.
They do. Dana suffered blunt and sharp force trauma. Nothing establishes the precise order of those injuries, but the violence indicates she was not passive or already sedated. She likely fought.
Which explains why Dana's death was louder and less controlled than the others.
Maeve and Nolan were killed separately in their bedrooms by suffocation. There was no need for Lorna to move loudly through the house or use the same weapon. Bedding was available, and the children may have been asleep, frightened, or waiting for an adult to tell them what to do.
That last part is unbearable. A parent does not need physical dominance first. A parent already has compliance.
Yes. Investigators found no evidence that either child escaped the bedroom or reached the stairs.
And Ivy remained in the nursery because she was 2. She could not describe what happened, and preserving one child preserved Lorna's identity as a surviving mother.
That is the behavioral interpretation prosecutors adopted. Ivy's survival was not evidence that the offender ran out of time. It was a selective decision with practical and emotional benefits for Lorna.
She eliminated the people who could expose the immediate lie and kept the person who could be raised inside it.
After the killings, Lorna managed the garage. She removed Evan's bank statement packet and likely destroyed or discarded it. The packet has never been recovered, so investigators cannot identify the exact disposal method.
But its removal had a clear purpose. Without those statements, police saw household debt instead of theft.
She wiped the exposed portion of the freezer handle after blood had dried, missing the trace recessed inside it. Then she wrote, "Don't open the side door," over the wipe streaks.
Why write that specific instruction?
To make the chain door appear relevant to Evan's mental state, the warning suggested confinement, control, and preparation. It directed detectives to read an ordinary security chain as part of his final plan.
It also gave the garage a sentence. A staged room is stronger when it seems to speak for the dead person.
Then Lorna made the shallow cut through her nightshirt and shoulder. It produced visible blood without threatening muscle, major vessels, or mobility.
Victim status in one controlled line.
She left drops along the route toward the garage, positioned herself near the wall phone, and called 911.
What was the metallic clicking behind her call?
A loose upper guide roller on the overhead door. One of the responding officers noted that the roller clicked whenever the bottom panel was pressed or shifted in its track. Lorna was beside the door while speaking and later raised it for deputies.
So no unknown person moving around, just a mechanical roller and Lorna touching or leaning against the door.
That is the concrete explanation. The sound does not prove staging, but it places her close enough to manipulate the door while telling dispatch she was afraid to move.
And Raphael's woman crying?
That was almost certainly Lorna. Whether the crying was genuine distress after killing her family, deliberate performance for neighbors, or some combination cannot be separated. 27 years later.
But it was not evidence of an intruder.
No. Remember Raphael's statement from earlier? It sounded like an independent witness confirming Lorna had been attacked. It was actually a witness hearing the person who controlled the scene.
That's the reframe. Her distress may have been real, but distress does not tell us innocence. Offenders can panic over consequences, loss of control, or the scale of what they have done.
Lorna waited until morning because discovery at 6:12 supported her unconsciousness claim. It also gave the sedative time to metabolize and Evan's lividity time to fix before deputies saw him suspended.
She needed time for the body to become evidence against the story, but the original examination did not read it correctly.
Precisely. A competent post-mortem position analysis should have exposed the hanging immediately. The lividity was not subtle. Dr. Rusk documented its color, but failed to compare its location with the position in which Evan was found.
That is not a technology problem.
No, Investigators in 1999 understood lividity, they understood skull fractures, they understood that a shallow wound can be staged. Modern testing found the sedative and refined the blood evidence, but the first case also failed at basic observation and adversarial thinking.
The cold case team did not invent a new body. They finally listened to the one already in the file.
And that is my concession beyond being wrong about Evan. I treated the original investigators' access to the fresh scene as a reason to defer to their conclusion. In this case, proximity did not produce accuracy. Their early certainty contaminated interpretation more thoroughly than time did.
That's well said.
Don't frame that either.
Too late.
The envelope deoxyribonucleic acid was compared with Lorna's known profile developed from her blood on the preserved nightshirt and scene swabs. The saliva profile matched her. It did not come from casual contact with the outside of the envelope, it came from the adhesive seal.
What did she say when detectives asked about it?
Initially, she denied sending any letter and suggested someone might have retrieved an envelope from her trash. When detectives explained the deoxyribonucleic acid came from saliva beneath the sealed flap, she said she sometimes sealed envelopes for other people because she kept stationery at home.
Did she identify one of those people?
No. She said she could not remember. She also claimed the detail about the chain side door had appeared in newspaper coverage.
It had not.
Detectives reviewed every archived article and broadcast transcript they could locate. The chain was omitted. The public knew the garage was secured. It did not know that specific service door remained fastened from inside.
And file access was audited.
Yes. No evidence showed that Lorna ever lawfully reviewed the unredacted case file. Her knowledge came from being present when the chain was in place.
That letter is remarkable because almost every part of it behaves differently from how she intended. The anonymous wording identifies personal investment. The chain door claim identifies inside knowledge. The seal identifies her body.
And the demand to stop investigating indicates motive for sending it. She was not offering new information. She was attempting to preserve an old conclusion. Handwriting analysis added another layer. Examiners found repeated similarities in how the writer formed capital letters, crossed certain consonants, and compressed words near the right margin.
But not enough to stand alone.
Correct. Handwriting is affected by disguise, age, stress, and writing position. The examiner reported strong consistency, not unique identification. In combination with sealed deoxyribonucleic acid, geography, browser history, and confidential scene knowledge, it became powerful corroboration.
Did the search of Lorna's home find the same stationery?
Investigators recovered envelopes of the same size and manufacturer, but that product was widely sold. More important were handwritten drafts in a shredded paper bin. Technicians reconstructed fragments containing references to Evan's temper and police harassment.
Any exact sentence from the mailed letter?
No complete match. Prosecutors characterized the fragments as drafting material. The defense can argue they were private notes prepared after Lorna watched the news.
Fair challenge, but innocent private notes do not explain her saliva beneath the anonymous seal.
Nor do they explain why she denied involvement before offering the unnamed envelope explanation. On July 9, 2026, police arrested Lorna Merritt at her Lake Sibley home. She was charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder in the deaths of Evan, Dana, Maeve, and Nolan.
4 counts is the formal correction Evan never lived to see.
The complaint alleged financial self-preservation, concealment of fraud, and insurance proceeds as interconnected motives. It also alleged that the children were killed to complete the false family annihilation scene and prevent the household from continuing beyond Lorna's control.
Was there a charge for the forged transfers?
Prosecutors reviewed financial offenses, but limitation periods and the age of individual transactions complicated separate charges. The transfers remained central as motive evidence.
And Miles?
Not charged. His press room alibi held. He cooperated after being confronted with the calling card records, and investigators found no evidence he knew about or assisted with the murders.
Clay and Raphael stayed cleared.
Yes. Clay was documented in Finlay during the attack window. Raphael's contradictions were explained by his own marital argument and faulty time memory. Neither man's trace evidence appeared in the Merritt scene. The police chief announced the arrest that afternoon. The department's statement did something the 1999 coverage had not. It named Evan as a homicide victim.
Authorities now say Evan Merritt was drugged, struck in the head, and suspended from a garage hoist after death. His widow, Lorna Merritt, is accused of killing Evan, Dana Merritt, and the children, Maeve and Nolan, before staging the scene.
27 years to change one word from offender to victim.
Clay attended the briefing but did not speak at the podium. Through an attorney, he said his brother's name had been damaged for longer than Maeve and Nolan had been alive.
That sentence lands.
Ivy, now an adult, requested privacy. She was not accused of knowing anything about the crimes or the letter. Investigators treated her as a surviving child whose understanding of her family had been shaped by the same false story imposed on the public.
She lost 4 people that night, then learned the parent who raised her was accused of taking them.
Yes, there is no version of resolution that restores her childhood.
Legally, where does the case stand?
Lorna has been charged and the prosecution remains pending. She has entered a plea of not guilty. Charges are allegations until resolved in court.
But you consider the case solved.
Investigatively, yes. The physical sequence, motive, concealed finances, insider letter, and deoxyribonucleic acid converge on Lorna. I would still expect defense challenges to the age of the samples, the interpretation of the brake drum stain, and the inability to date her palm print.
They may also argue someone else used her prescription, or that she sealed the envelope without knowing its contents.
They may. A prosecutor must prove more than suspicion. But the case does not rely on one ambiguous item. The sedative establishes incapacitation, the fracture establishes assault, lividity establishes postmortem suspension, the bank records establish exposure, the letter establishes active intervention in the reopened case.
And her controlled injury establishes the survivor role was physically manufactured.
Supported as manufactured, yes. I would phrase that carefully in front of a jury.
You'd ruin all my best slides.
I would keep them admissible.
I keep coming back to the workbench. Evan was building something for Nolan to grow into. The same surface held the object prosecutors believe was used to kill him.
And the photograph of that bench preserved evidence nobody understood at the time. It established the drum's location, the family's access to it, and the ordinary domestic setting that made the weapon easy to overlook.
Maeve had already claimed her painting corner. Nolan had goggles waiting for him. Those details matter because the original story reduced their deaths to symptoms of Evan's financial collapse.
They were not symbols in his breakdown. They were people he was planning a future with. Dana was not collateral. She was a woman preparing to help her brother read financial statements. That may be why she became dangerous to Lorna.
Evan's habit of preserving receipts and confronting problems directly brought him to the truth. It also put him in front of someone whose entire life depended on keeping that truth private.
The fraud motive explains timing. The insurance explains material benefit. Control explains the scale and staging. None of it requires an irrational or unknowable impulse.
It was calculated survival at everybody else's expense.
There are 2 evidence lessons here. First, a scene is not a conclusion. A hanging is a body position until pathology proves a hanging death. A survivor's wound is an injury until its mechanics are tested. A message beside a body is not automatically the dead person's message.
Second, evidence can retain the mistake the offender forgot making.
Blood remained inside the freezer recess after the visible surface was wiped. Impact droplets remained inside the brake drum. Temazepam remained in a sealed tube. Lividity remained in photographs and tissue records. Saliva remained beneath an envelope flap.
Tiny protected spaces.
Exactly. Grooves, seals, preserved samples, places staging did not fully reach.
Why send the letter at all then? Silence had protected her for nearly 27 years.
Because the cold case announcement told her silence was no longer control. Investigators were examining the garage, and Lorna knew the garage contained the false hanging, the freezer message, the brake drum, and the chain door. The letter was an attempt to get ahead of those discoveries.
She wanted to become the invisible authority one more time. Tell police what the garage meant before the garage told them itself.
Yes. Long successful offenders often confuse an unchallenged story with a proven one. Renewed testing threatened that distinction, so she intervened.
And she focused so completely on the wording that she forgot the envelope was also a witness.
Paper records handling, adhesive records, saliva, postal marks record movement. There was nothing exotic about how the letter exposed her. It was basic forensic collection applied carefully.
The letter defended Evan as the killer because she needed him guilty even in death. That is the psychological center for me. She was not defending her husband, she was defending the role she had assigned him.
And by repeating confidential scene knowledge, she placed herself back inside the garage.
The phrase "the side door stayed chained" was meant to close entry points. Instead, it narrowed the writer to someone who had seen that chain before police opened the scene.
Then the deoxyribonucleic acid supplied the name.
Lorna survived the murders because she authored them. The anonymous letter failed because authorship leaves more than handwriting.
Evan's last verified act was leaving work to confront a banking problem. For decades, that sentence was used to explain why he killed. Now it explains why he was killed.
The anger was real. The conclusion was backward.
That distinction should have been found in 1999. A proper autopsy, complete financial subpoenas, separation of the surviving witness, and reconstruction of the blood route could have prevented 27 years of false accusation.
So could one honest question, what evidence would exist if Lorna were lying?
That is the question the first investigators failed to ask. The Cold Case Project asked it, then followed the answers through archived bank film, preserved blood, an evidence locker, and an envelope seal.
No single miracle test.
No. Good chain of custody, corrected pathology, patient records work, and a sender who underestimated ordinary saliva.
The side door stayed chained, but the evidence got out.
Evan is cleared, Lorna is charged, and Christy was right.
Next week, we follow evidence that begins by confirming the obvious, then turns and points somewhere else entirely. Like this episode and subscribe so you're with us when that reversal lands.